You know how I know this is a German meeting is because it started, Olaf came on exactly at the moment the clock switched in a minute, which is awesome. So anyway, so yeah, and the other thing I know is I'm between everybody and beers this afternoon probably. So I'll try to keep it like a little bit shorter.
All right.
So Till and I, we discuss UX like all the time. And he was like, hey, we're doing this day, 25th anniversary kind of thing. Maybe you should come and talk about UX. It'd be really cool to hear like an American perspective. And, so first I'm going to introduce myself. So I'm Bob. I've been doing UX for probably like 15 years or so. And as he was talking about the American perspective, I'm thinking like, oh no, like what does that mean? I don't know the difference between German UX and American UX. But I figured maybe if I talk through some things, then maybe it'll be helpful.
This is what his house looks like all over the place.
So 15 years building digital products. These are some of the things, skills I've picked up over the years. I've been on multiple UX teams. I've worked with Scrum teams. I've been in agile environments, all kinds of stuff. And over the years, so I've been a UX designer and a researcher and a product manager. I've been a product owner for like multiple Scrum teams at the same time. Design team manager. I've done UI design. I was a front-end developer, even though everybody told me not to code anymore. I'm pretty sure like my team would be like, don't do that. I've even sat in as like a Scrum master, depending, all that kind of stuff. And so a little bit of my background. So I ended up getting this job at this company called Aweber. It's an email marketing platform. People may or may not know about it. But at the same time, so there I started as an interaction designer. We ended up bringing on this one UX designer named Jessica Ivins. And so her and I kind of worked to, under her mentorship, establish a UX department there. And so I worked there for 7 years, going through everything, and we did all kinds of really great work. And then while I was working there, I also worked at Philadelphia University. So I would teach UX to graduate level students. Then from there, I made the jump to Threat Quotient, which, as Olaf was saying, is a cybersecurity company. Essentially, what our software does is so imagine there's like big Fortune 100 companies, and they want to, so they pay a lot of money for this data. That's essentially saying who's hacking who and what tools they're using and all that kind of stuff. And so they can take our platform, they can bring it in, they can normalize it, and then they can overlay it on their network and say, like, do we see anything here? What's going on there? So it's very complex. There's a lot of interesting problems to solve and stuff like that. So, and then also on the side, I coach people through Design Lab. So I probably coached about 50 UX people. I've helped with career services and UX bootcamp things and all kinds of stuff like that. So, but what I want to talk about today is incorporating customer feedback. And the main things I want to focus on are the value of having UX upstream, which I'm a firm believer. It always doesn't end up the best when you inherit a project and it's already really far along. They're like, hey, could you do the UX for this? And you're like, kind of, I wish I was included a little bit earlier because it probably would have saved us a lot of money. But I want to share our process in terms of how we work as a company at Threat Quotient. And then I also want to share some examples of how, doing that's been paying off. It works really well. So first thing is, so a funny thing happens as a company grows. It can easily become disconnected from its customers. And so what I mean by that is in the beginning, so I think of Threat Quotient, it was the 5th hire, the only designer on the team for like a year or two. And it was like literally us and the customers, and we talked to each other all the time. And so it was very easy for the stakeholders, essentially to be connected to the customers, because if you weren't listening to them, then you didn't have a business and they didn't buy your software and, whatever. So as the business grows, you look at it and there starts to be, injecting different departments. So there's marketing and design and product and engineering, and you have like frontline, things that talk with customers a little bit more. So there's like the sales team and customer support and all that kind of stuff. And the stakeholders are kind of, there's a buffer between them and the customers. And the stakeholders are people that ultimately make design decisions, whether they realize it or not. So do we hire more designers? Do we invest more in product management, that kind of thing? Those are indirect design decisions that affect the end product and the success of the company. So they start to use business metrics, things like, growth rate and churn rate and, average revenue per account and lead velocity and all these different kinds of things, to kind of get a feel for like how the business is doing. But the problem is that these business metrics don't necessarily map one-to-one to customer needs, or user needs. And I feel like a lot of times if you focus on really understanding the problems customers are trying to solve using your software, everything kind of falls in line, and it ends up boosting those different metrics through doing the groundwork for it. So therefore, they start to inject these different things, and I'm probably preaching that choir here a little bit, but so you stay connected through things like market research. So market research is like, where's the market now? Where's it headed? If our company is behind, what things could we do to kind of meet it halfway? What are smart steps? Obviously you don't want to just copy your competitors. And then more so, UX research and testing. So this is, okay, we're doing these different things. We're headed towards this flag in the distance. Are they working? Are these things going to make us successful? And you can test them one by one. Failure happens a day at a time. So there's a general rule of thumb here. So it's like every dollar spent routinely focused on improving UI UX returns $10 to $100 in the long run. And the reason why, if you think about it, is because the cost of developing things increases non-linearly. So in the beginning, when you have the inception of a project, you have a few people working on it. The artifacts are super lightweight, so it's really easy to change them. But as you have more people come on, imagine I'm working on my house, and we're halfway through doing the bathroom, and I'm like, you know what? I don't want the toilet there. I want it over there. They're like, okay, well, sure, you could have told us, but now that you want to do that, that's super expensive to do because we've already laid the tile and we've already done the plumbing and all that kind of stuff. So if you invest time up front, you're going to lower your risk, de-risk the project in the long run when all these people and you're paying all these salaries to build this thing. And another way to think of it, so there's this concept of the cone of uncertainty. And so the sooner we can narrow in on the scope of the project, the better off we are developing it, because again, we feel more confident in what we're making. So I've seen a notable impact from investing in, early in the process and using customer feedback throughout all of it. Because what happens is when we have a solid product definition, turns out developers are really good at making things. So if you can give them, here's exactly what I want or close to what I want, and that it's actually vetted and, customer feedback and usability testing and all that kind of stuff, turns out making a plan is actually much easier for them because it's not as ambiguous. And then from there, now they can project better delivery dates because they know exactly what it is. And from that, you have a more accurate roadmap. So now all of a sudden, there's a little bit more confidence. And the sales team is confident in your ability to execute, which is great. And customer confidence. So again, when you get customers, you're essentially saying, come grow with our company. This is where we're taking this. This is our vision for how we're going to solve your problems. So people are investing in you and your product. And so if you're delivering on your roadmap promises and you're solving these problems for them, then they're getting confidence in your ability to deliver on this vision. So it just cascades down dramatically. So focusing on design really helps your bottom line because it improves things like user retention, customer loyalty, and user productivity. The thing that it avoids, so I call this the spiral of death. I don't really know if there's any term for it, but so essentially we've seen this before when we do projects wrong. And trust me when I say, through my years of experience, I've done a lot of good things, I've done a lot of bad things, and I've lived with the consequences and had to fix them a lot of times. So I've seen it all, but from the spiral of death. So you have misaligned expectations essentially around what the product's supposed to do, which leads to customer confusion, which then leads to frustration. And so maybe at that point they're done, but maybe they support it. They submit a ticket to customer support or whatever it might be, which either leads to one of two things. So it's either a feature request they're going to ask for, or it's going to be a bug submitted, which you'd have to work on. Which then, depending, if people, if it's a SaaS product, then maybe eventually they're done and they're like, I'm not going to renew. Or for us, we have annual contracts. And so customers might come to us and say, guys, we've submitted all these things, you're not really responsive to them. Why should we renew? Or they're going to try to get a cheaper price for whatever it is. And then on top of that, there's another thing. So imagine every single thing we add that isn't really adding value to the platform is adding complication. but then engineering has to support it, and the sales team has to figure out how to talk about it. So when customers ask about it, they have to have some sort of story, or they try to, skirt it under the table and not really talk about it and that kind of thing. But if those pains get big enough, then it results in roadmap disruption. So our plan, our vision for this year is to be here. We can't execute on that because we have to fix the thing we didn't do right before. So it's really problematic. So this is a quote I really like. So if you're the fastest runner on the planet, but you're running a race in the wrong direction, you're not going to win very many gold medals. And I think it's so true, because a lot of teams focus on like, how can we make things faster? How can we ship product? All that kind of stuff. And the reality is, if you're shipping the wrong thing, it doesn't really matter how fast you go. So success is more measured in outcomes instead of output. So you have to think about like, what are the key things you can look for that determine if you're successful, rather than like, did we hit our deadline or not? And, did we ship a bunch of things this year? It's not really valuable. And so when I think of UX, so I talk to students for a design lab, and it's like, there's this aura around UX that it's like this magic thing. And, and I'm like, honestly, UX, like there's a bunch of exercises you can do, but really it boils down to, are you asking the right questions at the right time? So depending on the project, how can you complement it to get more information to make smarter decisions? So at our company, we practice agile development. And I feel like agile development and Scrum and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of like super dogmatic approaches where it's like, oh, this is the only way, like that kind of vibe. And I think that a lot of times, there's this concept of failing fast. And, from my standpoint, like, I don't want to fail at all, to be honest. But from the standpoint, you look at it and it's like, okay, so we can only plan 2 weeks ahead because we don't know, is kind of the vibe in the whole agile world to some degree. And so I've written extensively about this on Medium, where, I don't think that agile really replaces the need for planning, because imagine I'm working on some sort of complex search interface or whatever it is. As a design team, we need to think through all the different aspects of that to make sure that they coexist, because otherwise, and I've been part of this, if you're too short-sighted, then it ends up being way more work in the long run, compared to if you knew where you need to go anyway. And so a lot of times with the agile thing, when you're thinking of 2-week increments, it's mainly saying like, build something, test the water, learn from it. That works really good for a product that hasn't been in the market before. But if you know that there's a certain parity you have to reach, then from there, it's like, okay, well, we know we're building a car, and we know cars have wheels and they have a steering wheel. So like, we probably need that, like we don't have to iterate to see if people need to steer, So agile without research and proper planning up front from a UX standpoint is guessing. And guessing is not really an efficient way to do things. I'd much rather base things on, data and research, even if it's lightweight research, than to just guess and see if we're right.
I feel like that is like the best quote ever.
Nice. So the way I look at it is Scrum and Agile is a way to make the team more efficient for sure. But if you're putting in shitty plans, you're going to get shitty iterations out, and it's not going to be good. No one's going to want to use your product and that kind of thing. So it's like the more effort you put into making smart decisions and validating them, the better it'll be. So here's a look at our planning process. And again, so I brought up the Agile thing because everybody talks about there's Agile and there's Waterfall. And Waterfall is like, okay, we're going to go dark for 8 months, and then we're going to surface. We'll be like, we made this. And people are like, what is this? I didn't want this. This is horrible. I hate you. So from this standpoint, this is a little bit of a mix. So essentially you have an upfront discovery phase, which we're doing user research and, trying to explore the problem space, trying to learn as much as we can from it. And then from the design standpoint, now we're getting tangible. So it's like, okay, we understand the problem space, and we're going to start making prototypes or, wireframes, or we're starting to make things tangible that we can actually show to people. And then execution, we're shipping in increments. So at any point, if we get new information, we could pivot if we wanted to. And I think that's the agile aspect of it. So the way I look at this, because I think sometimes UX has a little bit of trouble trying to fit into agile when you treat it that dogmatic way. So in the discovery phase, I go into this mode where when we're talking to customers, we're trying to we're answering open questions. So like, we'll start a project, we're like, this is the thing we want to do. And within that project and that definition, there's a lot of assumptions in there. We think the customers need this, and therefore we're going to do this, that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, like, sure, let's go just validate those two. Like, it's not saying they're necessarily wrong, but like, let's just double check, it couldn't hurt. So we're validating those assumptions. We're talking to customers. We're trying to answer any open questions we have about it. We don't really know about this, or how far we should go here, that kind of thing. We're generally testing the direction. So as we talk to people, if we get a feel for like, yeah, this doesn't work for them, then it's like, well, if you talk to enough people, is this really the right thing to do? We're also identifying missed scope. So it's like, here's this thing we're going to make. And they're like, oh, do you guys think about doing this? Or like, it'd be really helpful is if it solved this thing, And then also identifying unknowns, anything that comes up that we just didn't expect. So that's the discovery phase. Then you go to the design phase. So design phase, essentially, it's like, okay, we've made a wireframe, or we have a prototype or something. And again, super lightweight. I think we had this import process where you take thread intel and you bring it in the thread queue. I wireframed it out. I think the wireframes, took days. It wasn't too much time. And then we had multiple calls, and each call between them, I tweaked the interface a little bit. And so I think I went through like 8 or 9 iterations of it. And at the end, when we were done, we're like, oh, we feel really good about this. And it was my time moving little squares on a page. It was like not really complicated work to do. But then from that, so we put the wireframes in front of people, or we put a prototype in front of people, and we have them try to use it. And we learn from that. And again, there's still a chance here that like, they're like, oh, this is great. Like, what about this thing? Like, I didn't see that, and there's still that conversation for missed scope. And then from there, so we do the discovery and the design phase, and then we're going into execution, and we're shipping in increments, and we're delivering value in each sprint. So here is a chance for testing functionality. So it's like we ship feature X. There's so many different companies where, again, they're so focused on shipping stuff and not like, shipped it, did it work? So it's like, are customers adopting this? Do we have any metrics showing like there's a spike there in people using it? Is it meeting their needs? Are they playing with it? And they're like, yeah, that's cool, I guess, but like, it doesn't really help me that much, so I'm just going to continue to do my own workflow. And then are there any meaningful refinements we can make? Which I'll go into an example for that later. And on top of that, if we're testing regularly, then during the development phase, so how many times would I be in a sprint with the team, and it's a morning meeting, and we're going through, and they're like, hey, this thing, it doesn't work like we thought it did, so we need to pivot. And then there's some sort of like argument, or like how do we do this? Do we do it this way or this way? And people are super opinionated and whatever. And it's like, what? I have a customer call today. I'll just run it by them and kind of get a feel for it and see. And so a lot of times that will help, break the tension of like, what should we do? Because again, we're all after the same end goal. It's not really about the solution. It's about like, solving the problem. So from that standpoint, the other thing I'll do is I'll actually have an open door policy. So like if we have calls with different customers, I'll say, I'll invite the people working on that product to come in and sit in and watch people use it. And there's no motivator better than that, because, if people are, imagine watching something and someone's struggling with a bug, and then the engineer's like, what, I saw that bug in the backlog and I can fix that this afternoon. Like, it's just such a great motivator. Go ahead.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Because you showed, as the company grows, you have so many different departments and units, and they're all like kind of focusing on their own things, like marketing and sales and engineering and product and stuff like that. So in my experience, if there's too many people in the room, like people tend to look away from things, but like, I'll have the other guy deal with that. So, and you said that maybe sales calls them up and be like, hey, let's talk this through. So who do you think would be a designated responsible person for doing UX research, or asking the customer about feedback within a bigger company? Not a smaller one, but like a bigger one. Like who should do that, and who should feel responsible for asking the customer?
Well, I think that my default answer is obviously like UX people, but I think that there's a lot of value with teaming up with people. So I've actually worked with salespeople during. So imagine someone's evaluating our software, and I'm like, what? Like, we're actually testing. We're working on this project right now, and we're kind of testing it. And I know that they have our software installed and they're playing with it. Would you mind if we jumped on a call with them? And so like a lot of people might think like, oh man, like don't wreck our chances at this deal. But my general experience is that sales can actually leverage that, and it's a good thing because it's like, oh, like you want to hear my opinion? Like you're going to connect me directly with the team making the software. That's awesome. You know, so like there's a lot of positive vibes there, and then you start to build a rapport with both the sales team and, you know, with the customer. So in the future, when there's another thing coming up, you're like, do you mind if I tap them on the shoulder to get them to do this thing? And they're like, go for it, like totally. You know, it just makes everybody look good because they see your process, they see how thoughtful you are in building something. So
all right, thanks, man.
Yep. So and the reality is, so this whole thing, like this process, it really works well. So here's an example of us going through this process and how we almost went the wrong way at one point. So this is our dashboard in our product. And again, you know, it's threat intelligence coming in, security teams are looking at this and essentially trying to prioritize their work and, you know, understand like state of the union in terms of like what's going on, essentially. So this is a dashboard. So at one point in time, we're working, so there's a different request for proposals, and companies will say, hey, you know, come bid, you know, bid for us to use your software kind of thing. So on that, you can set up booby traps for your competitors. And so if you know the strengths and weaknesses that they have, you can be like, oh, you guys definitely need this, you know, and you add that, here's an RFP you can use. And it kind of sets up traps because they can't check boxes on it, and then they can't get in to bid for the deal, essentially. So with this, we knew that, so customizable dashboards was one of those check boxes. And when we would talk to people, they weren't totally sure why they needed it, but it was on there and they're like, we need it. And so from our sales department, they're like, guys, we need to do something here, because if we don't even get a chance to talk to these people because we're just ruled out immediately. So what happened was someone at the company, they spin up this prototype in like a weekend. And they're like, all right, I took all the endpoints in the app and I built out these dashboards, and they're technically customizable. But as we're looking at it, we're starting to realize, well, you know, these are using additional things we already kind of have dashboards for, and they're not particularly useful. They're not particularly actionable. And so we want to kind of leapfrog and get a little bit further. So with that, so we have this thing and it's like, okay, well, this could answer this thing for us, you know, this need. So it's kind of proposed to me like, all right, what do? We could do path A, which is implement the prototype verbatim. Or we could do path B, which technically, if we're trying to check the box, would get, you know, it's a smaller portion of the prototype, but technically it's customizable. So therefore we can go in and we can start talking to these people and have conversations and sell them on other values of the platform. But from ongoing research, and the best thing about customer research is it's a cumulative thing. So the more you do, it's not like you're like, oh, I did this research for this other project, completely forget about it, can't use it anymore. You know, it's like you're building a database of knowledge of your customers. So it's like always going to be valuable, you know, and you can lean on previous studies to expedite things. But so we knew like customers struggled with a place to start in our application. Our application's pretty big. There's a lot of stuff to it. And so, you know, any sort of starting point that we can kind of queue up for them would be great. They also need a ability to visualize their data, which they couldn't really do. We could visualize certain pieces of data, but not necessarily context specific to like their goals. Teams need to share a workplace. And we also knew that customers had really unique data sets. So I'm taking all this information from previous studies we've done. And so looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, path A or path B, like, what do we do? And I'm like, oh man, both these things lead to that spiral of death. Like we're gonna make this dashboard and we're gonna give it to them, and they're like, what the hell is this? Like this isn't helpful. And they'll maybe tolerate it for a little bit, but then you'll be like, all right, you guys are really gonna do dashboards now, right? Like we need this dashboard thing. So what we did was we opted to follow that process, and we went through and we talked to customers and all that kind of stuff. And so this is an example of a document we'll have where I go through and I kind of outline, you know, different steps in the interaction design, all that kind of stuff. Nice little side fact for this. For each step in the process as we go through with this documentation, I'll add a section at the bottom that's like assumptions and open questions. So, and this is a tip I usually give to design lab people as well. So like as I'm going through, imagine nothing takes the wind out of your sails during like a meeting where you're trying to go through and plan a project with the engineering team. When someone comes up with a question and it kind of throws you off your game and you're like, I don't really have a solid answer for that right now. So what I do is I put this section at the bottom of the doc, and it's like, okay, well, you know what? Let's write that down, and we'll come back to it, so I can go get an answer. But then it doesn't like wreck your flow and going through the project. You know, and it's noted, and that person's like, okay, well, cool, it's written down. Like I know we'll get back to it. Yeah, so that's a nice little tip thing there. But yeah, so that dashboard project was super successful, and so going to our all hands in the spring, the whole all hands, like it was like all around how we can market dashboards and you know, how sales team can leverage them and how we can leave things for prospects to get them to see value of the product sooner. Were you gonna? I don't know if you wanted to interject or not. You look like maybe.
Did I have a look like maybe. Interjecting? No, maybe I was just staring straight at the camera. I was like,
got it. Don't stare at the camera. All right. So here's another thing for the dashboards thing, and this is I like this story because what it does is it shows an example of something that a lot of times you think like, all right, if we put a lot of effort into this product spec, then like we're golden. But the reality is you have to watch people use your software because some things fall outside the realm of a product spec, but affect the success of what you're working on. So during the dashboards thing, we did this 2-week duration where we're like, all right, people have had dashboards for a little bit now. We have multiple 1-hour sessions with customers, and we're like, all right, I want to understand like what dashboards are you making, and are the controls to manipulate the data, are they good enough? You know, like is there anything missing? But then we're also looking for unaccounted for workflows, and we're also still iterating on it. So we just want to like put some stuff in front of you and see like what your thoughts are in terms of, you know, stack ranking them or whatever. So here's a super secret report. So secret I had to blur it out. But in cybersecurity, people are a huge liability. So like no matter how good your perimeter is for your network and all the things you're deploying, it will not stop someone from HR from opening a CV that is malicious that they had no idea. You know, so it's like people are generally the weakest link in terms of security. So what would happen is there'd be these customers and they have all these security reports here. And the security team knows that these are relevant to other people in the company. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to set up a threat queue dashboard. And they wanted to make this dashboard where it's like, all right, you got to log in and there's a couple reports that will be handpicked by our team just to keep you in the know. So like you're making good decisions security wise. So imagine that this is one of the tables on this dashboard. So your job is you're coming in and you're going to read this first report here. So, you know, my question is like, how do I view this report? And again, this is our new dashboard thing. We just put a bunch of time into it. So I'm like, I don't know, you know, let me click this I thing, right? And so it pops open this preview panel thing, which tells me a little bit more information about the file, how it's organized in our system. But I'm still like, all right, well, you told me to read this report. Like, I don't know where to go. All right, so you know what? I'm going to click the you know, the icon to go to this actual file in the system. So now I go to it. So now here's this page, which again, our system, it's a bunch of analysts organizing information. So they have to be able to classify things and tag them and, you know, to disseminate them to the proper places. So this page is great for them. They can do, you know, they can organize and do whatever. But at the same time, like for me, you know, I'm just trying to view this report. So if you look at it, and I made a video for this. So again, so I'm on this page, and so I'm just trying to learn about this thing that you told me I'm supposed to care about. So again, so I'm scrolling down. Still don't really see the report or how to get it. So now if you look, so there's download file, and it's way down in the middle of the page. So, you know, at this point you lost me anyway. Like no one's gonna go this far. There's like, you know what, like, meh, not gonna do it. And then on top of that, once you download it, well, now it's in a downloads folder on my desktop. So I can't even, you know, I have to find it again. Super pain in the ass. So the more time we spend customers using our software, or spend time watching customers use our software, the better our designs become because of things like this. So this file system thing, that files page has existed since like day one in our software. We weren't really thinking about that when we were doing this. You know, it was you know, total different set of problems at the time. And the dashboard thing, we're like, well, what widgets do we make? How do we visualize data? All that kind of stuff. We weren't really thinking about this use case for it. And we definitely weren't thinking about this thread through the system of people trying to use it. So by watching customers use it, it's like this came up and it was like, this was a prominent thing. So like, that's, you know, awesome. So what we did was phase 2 of the project. We're like, oh, we have these we're going to make sharing great for dashboards. We're going to do all these things. And so as we started talking to customers, it's like, you know what, like this is actually low hanging fruit. It's really easy to do and it's super impactful. So it was like, you know, we have a Slack channel for customers that they can, you know, contact with us and, you know, whatever. And so, you know, I posted there, I'm like, guys, like, thank you so much for this call. It was super helpful. By the way, you know, we added a link here so you can download your reports directly. And on top of that, like there's a way in that we reskinned that menu and made it look better, the pop-up panel. And there's also a really prominent download link too. So it's like now you can get the files easier. So with this, so now like circling back, talking about, you know, pushing for investment in UX, because, you know, talking until before this, I was like, what kind of topics could I go over? It seems like this would be pretty relevant for people trying to get buy-in and you know, have more investment in UX. So the way that I generally present these different things, like, and I've done it throughout my career, is, you know, finding these small wins and then telling the story about them and bringing people along for the journey. So talking through that file thing where other people are like, you know what, I've used software like that too, and I hated it. It was such a pain in the ass. You know, anything like that, anecdotal thing you can bring to the table, it highlights the value that UX provides in a really tangible way that like people remember. And so there's two story arcs I tend to use for presentations like this. So there's in order to get like set expectations and get buy-in, usually the way it goes is like, okay, this is where we were, this is where we want to be, this is how we need to get there, and these are the resources we need, you know, and painting that picture in that way. And so that's how I push to build a design team and you know, push for hiring more people and that kind of thing. The other story arc I tend to use is usually after that, where it's like, okay, I'm trying to build trust in my ability to deliver. So it's like, this is where we were, this is what we learned, and here's how we improve because of it. Here's the end result. And the more you can sprinkle in customer clips or whatever of people actually, you know, struggling in the beginning and then successful in the end, it just really, really resonates with your audience. So with that, I think I'm pretty much done. And you know, so thanks for listening. Yeah. So any questions? Or?
This is so cool. Thank you so much. Ja, an die werten Zuhörer und Zuhörerinnen. Vielleicht gibt es noch eine Frage, die wir an Bob stellen wollen. Olaf, ich weiß nicht, vielleicht hast du auch welche vorliegen?
Yes, I have a question. Actually, it's an observation, and perhaps you can help me with that, Bob. From what I understood, your role is much more integrated than our typical UX researcher role here in Germany. For instance, you talked about bugs, you talked about sales, and if the product would fly or not. Whereas typically our scope when we do UX research in Germany is more like, do we have any usability flaws? Do we have a nice user experience? Correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, too, but I think your role is much more on a much higher level. It's much more integrated. So you are accompanying the whole development process from a helicopter view, so to say. Is this right, or is this an exaggeration from me?
No, that's true. The way I think about it is, here's my theory on this. You start to see more job postings that is like product design rather than UX design, that kind of thing. And so I think that one of the reasons why I want to talk through some of these things is I think back to when I worked at AWeber, for example, and I would be really frustrated because I would be talking to customers every day, and I'm like, I don't understand why the business is making this decision. It doesn't seem to jive with like the things I see. And so I think that as UX evolves, you always hear like the UX designer needs a seat at the table. And from my perspective, it's like, all right, well, you know, there's leaders and there's managers, like lead, like do something, and then you'll get a seat at the table. But you can't complain about getting a seat at the table. You have to prove your value. So the more that UX people can be business minded and understand the different tensions set up within an organization, the more successful they'll be, the more successful their product will be, and the happier they'll be, because they'll start to understand like, well, that's why that played out. Or, you know, and honestly, like one of the reasons why I joined a startup was because, you know, I talk about these things. I'm like, I want to see it work, you know? So like when I joined ThreatQ, it was like, a seed round of funding. And since then, our team's about 100 people, and we raised $50 million in funding. And we have, governments using our software and stuff. And so it's like, from my standpoint, I'm like, how full of shit am I? Like, I want to see these things. And I'm ultimately accountable. Everybody's accountable for the success of the product. So it's like, the more you understand that, the better. So.
Yeah. Hey, Bob. Just
Bob,
a quick check-in. I think
stop your screen sharing, and so we can see you. You're so beautiful. I know you, and that's.
You guys couldn't see me before?
Nice. No, we could.
That's
absolutely
much better. We have a question from the audience. This is with regards to the methods you're working with, Bob? Is it like workshops? It's IDIs, focus groups? Is it small online or web surveys? What are you doing usually?
So our software is on premise, so we don't really have the benefit of like SaaS software, like cloud-based stuff. When I was at Aweber, everything, it was a SaaS-based software. So what we would do, we would use a mix of Google Analytics, click events on different things to judge like engagement for stuff. We would send out surveys for things. We would do live recruiting and do usability tests twice a day, depending on where we were in the cycle of a project. We would do design sprint type workshop things where design sprints are really great because it helps get stakeholders in alignment, and it helps like shake out requirements, and it also helps bring outside ideas in. So like customer support people, if you ask them what should we work on, they're like, oh my God, someone finally asked. Here's this list of all these things I wish we would do. So it's like we would do all those different things. Usability testing would largely be remote. So we do screen sharing and that kind of thing. And yeah, and a lot of those carry over to threat quotient too. So.
All right, thank you. Bob, in one of your slides, you were referring to the workplace you're working in, and then you said it's very important that you have integrated workspaces. So like development, sales, UX designers, and also work in the same workspace and in a close proximity to each other. Now with the COVID and Corona crisis, how does it work out? Do you experience any problems with this?
I don't know that I necessarily conveyed that intentionally. So here's the thing for us. I'm in New Jersey, VP of products in the UK. The product manager I work with every day is in New York. So we're fully remote, our company. We have 2 offices and they try to build culture around that. But honestly, with the tools and technologies today, we can do usability testing, collaborate with things. Like we use Miro a lot of times for like quick collaborations and stuff. I've seen design sprints run remotely. Obviously in person is always, nice and ideal, but you can do a ton of things remote. And especially because of COVID, there's tons of advice and things online about that. So one note on that, there's this thing called a rolling issues board. So essentially, imagine we're all working together, we're doing usability testing, that kind of thing. So after the session, we all debrief and we have a whiteboard, like big whiteboard in the space. And we write down like, okay, here are the things I saw, like struggled with this, blah, 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 all the things, right? And you write P1, participant 1 next to each thing. And then you do call number 2. You're like, okay, debrief. And so you write and you're like, okay, well, bullet point number 1, yep, person 2 had that as well. Okay, P2. So you can start to kind of like write down these things, and all that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, I wrote an article about it, about doing that remotely, where I use Trello instead. And you essentially go through and you write down these different things, and then you tag like each user, each participant, and then it's like, okay, this card has a lot of people tagged to it. Like maybe we should try to solve that problem. So yeah.
All right.
Maybe that answers.
No,
it does.
Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah.
We do the same thing.
Yeah. All right. Okay, guys, I think we're done. Many thanks, Bob. It was great revelation, and we have no further questions here, so you are free to go. We are going to have our beers here. You still have a couple of hours to work, I presume.
Yeah.
And again, many thanks. All right.
Thank you
I'll
so
switch back
much
to
for your
German.
help. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, yeah, very good.
Thanks,
Well,
guys.
see you soon. See you. I'm switching back to German right now, but Bob, I think you can understand me. Ja, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, wir sind am Ende unseres Kundentages angelangt. Vielen, vielen Dank für Ihre Geduld. Toll, dass Sie dabei geblieben sind. Ich hoffe, Sie konnten einiges mitnehmen. Ich fand es sehr, sehr facettenreich. Da haben wir uns natürlich auch darum bemüht, aber es ist auch immer wieder erstaunlich zu sehen, so in so einer zeitlichen Stauchung und Massierung, finde ich, wie facettenreich unsere Profession eigentlich ist. Sehr, sehr spannend, viele viele Forschungsfelder und so weiter. Und das ist ein schöner Beleg dafür, warum aus meiner Sicht zumindest, aus meiner Beobachtung heraus, unsere Relevanz, unsere Bedeutung weiterhin steigt. Ja. Ansonsten hoffe ich, Sie konnten viel für Ihre tägliche Arbeit mitnehmen und sind vielleicht auf die eine oder andere Inspiration gestoßen. Ein Hinweis noch vielleicht, wenn Sie Interesse haben an irgendwelchen Präsentationen, weiteren Informationen, wenden Sie sich gerne an uns. Sie haben ja die Kontaktinfos über die E-Mail-Einladungen. Da können Sie uns gerne kontaktieren. Ja, ansonsten bleibt noch zu sagen, achten Sie auf sich, trinken Sie genug, es ist sehr warm. Ich wünsche Ihnen alles Gute und hoffentlich auf bald und viele, viele Grüße vom gesamten SKOPOS-Team. Machen Sie es gut. Wiederschauen.